You're listening to Boobies and Noobies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. Welcome to Boobies and Noobies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and it's time for the penultimate installment of Slick Summer Nights. We've spent all of July sharing a few of our favorite steamy scenes in romance, and don't worry if you missed the previous 4 episodes because you can always go back and listen on your favorite podcatcher or on boobiesandnoobies.com. Also, if you're not already doing so, be sure to follow Boobies and Noobies on social media at Boobies Podcast, as we'll also be sharing the Slick Summer Nights picks throughout the month of July, and you, the listeners, can help determine your favorite of the steamiest and slickest scenes of them all by voting for your favorites on the Boobies and Noobies Instagram. If you're a fan of the show and you've got a few moments to spare, you might consider leaving Boobies and Noobies a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And last but not least, if you're in the mood to show this indie podcaster a little extra love and support, please consider joining us on Patreon. We've got monthly patron-only events, sneak peeks at what we're reading next, and so much more, and you gain instant access to it for as little as $1 per month. You will, of course, find links for all of the above in today's show notes, and now it's time to meet today's competitors. And today, we're going author v. author. First up is contemporary and new adult romance author whose latest release, Just One Favor, is now an Amazon Top 60 bestseller, Stephanie Rose. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, congrats on Amazon Top 60. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And facing off against Stephanie is Jess Bryant, author of Small Town, Paranormal, and Queer Romance, to name a few. The fact that she writes beyond one subgenre is just one of the reasons I love her. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. I think the last time I saw you in person, we were ghost hunting.
We were doing the tour in New Orleans, and it was so much fun.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Glad to have you both here. Before you tell us a little bit more about yourselves and the books you've selected for today's showdown, please allow me to introduce today's judge. She's a fellow podcaster and advocate for the romance genre. Please join me in welcoming host of the Shelf Love podcast, Andrea Martucci.
Kelly, thank you so much for inviting me here. I love any excuse to create a rubric, so I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate your appreciation of rubrics.
Yes, I am peak nerd at all times, and I can't help it. And, I've learned to love it about myself.
You came to the right place, so we are happy to have you back on Boobies and Noobies. Always great to chat with you. I'm excited to chat with all 3 of you. So why don't we start with each of you telling the fine folks listening at home a little bit about you and your relationship with the romance genre, both as readers, writers, and for Andrea, a podcaster. Let's start with Jess.
Okay. I love being first. So as my bio says, I am a small town girl. So I started out writing small town romance. I actually stole a Harlequin book from my aunt's collection when I was far too young to be reading it, and I have been in love with the genre ever since.
Love it.
I like to just write what I like to read. So I kind of jump around in subgenres, but the heart of everything is romance.
Couldn't have said it better. Andrea, how about you?
Yeah, so for the past 3 years, I've been hosting Shelf Love, which is a podcast about romance novels. And I talk about text, but I'm really interested in how readers engage with romance novels and how they consume them and how the texts affect them. And, I think that's coming out of having spent the last 20 plus years, almost 25 at this point, a quarter of a century reading romance novels and understanding how much of an impact they've had on my life and how I've used them at various points, like initially as also a too young person reading these romance novels and kind of trying to figure out how things worked, and then at different life stages kind of having different feelings about them and interpretations of them and different ways of kind of like using them to modulate my moods and different preferences. So kind of seeing that in my own life really helps me think about, questions I want to ask people who come on the podcast, and interest in people who are doing work on asking those questions also.
Yeah, and honestly, both to Jess and Stephanie and everybody listening, if you haven't listened to Shelf Love yet, I highly recommend downloading the latest episode, because Andrea approaches romance from a much more academic viewpoint as well, and just sort of like thinking beyond the book itself. We read and review romance here on Boobies and Noobies, which is fun, but I love what Andrea is doing because it's making us think a lot more critically about the genre as a whole, where it came from, how it's like moving forward. So yeah, big fan of the show.
Thanks, Kelly. I love your show too, because there's room in romance podcasting for so many different ways to explore romance novels.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie, how about you? What's your relationship with romance?
I've been publishing since 2015. I'm about to publish book number 13 this August. I started out as a blogger, like after the 50 Shades kind of craze where everybody loved indie romance. And I've been a reader my whole life. In fact, I also stole my aunt's romance novels when she used to come visit when I was little. So I owe a lot to her. So I read I read as much romance as I can. I read across different genres. I read a lot of romance. I'm currently in the middle of a series by Onley James. I started Unhinged 2 days ago. I finished it, and now I'm on to Psycho. I like romantic suspense, and that's like my author bucket list thing. I would love to write a romantic suspense, like to have like something in the background. But I basically, since I'm a kid, I've always loved to read romance. I'm happy to be here today to celebrate my friend Melanie's book. Hopefully I record it right and I make all the criteria. But so it's fun to celebrate something today.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I've noticed this to be a common theme across a lot of people's romance reading journey, is that a lot of times the first romance they read or can remember reading dates back to borrowing or stealing it from an aunt, a grandmother, their mom. My personal favorite is like picking it up at like the vacation house or like the lodge they were staying in one Thanksgiving. Like, so it's interesting that this seems to be a common occurrence amongst a lot of romance readers, is both how they read their first romance novel and also kind of at what age they read their first romance novel, which I know is different for everyone, but that is a trend that I've noticed for sure.
I was too young. I don't know exactly what age I was, but I was too young.
Definitely.
I think it's funny we all say too young, but now I'm a parent now and my daughter's 7, and now I'm like, I don't know if there's an age at which I feel like she'll be too young. Like, I'm like, you may not understand everything, but like, go for it and ask me questions.
Right. Like, what's too young?
One of my nieces turns 9 this year, and she asked her mom for romantic books for her birthday next month. And she was like, Jess, can you help me out? And I'm like, I don't have anything on my list age appropriate for an 8-year-old, but I will see what I can do.
My son calls them romantic books, that his mother writes romantic books.
I love that. That's so cute. Well, on the topic of romantic books, I'd love to know from each of you, seeing as we're here to talk about our favorite steamy moments from romantic books, what makes for a good, memorable, steamy scene in a romance, in your opinion? Because I know we all have our own barometer for what constitutes heat in our romance. So let's start with Stephanie this time.
I think a good steamy scene always has a little bit of emotion to it. I mean, like, I like
Like I have like a short list of like hot books that I like to reread when I'm just stressed out and I need like a reset. But I think like the best steamy scenes, especially from the hero's perspective, where it's like hot, but it's like messing with his head, that he doesn't even know he's like falling in deeper, but like he's just so obsessed and infatuated with the woman that he's with that he doesn't even realize that he's latching on his emotions. And that's one of my favorite types of scenes to read and write.
Interesting. So specifically from like the male POV.
I think it is. I think like, you know, the hottest scenes I've written and I've read typically are from the male point of view, because I feel like it's always so like hot to see them lose control like that. So
yeah,
that's
great.
My personal preference.
I think
that's what I think.
I think a lot of people would agree with you on that as well. So, Jess, what do you think?
Well, like Stephanie said, I think a lot of it comes down to the emotions behind the act, the actual intimacy within it. But since she covered that already, I'm going to go with one of my other favorite things, and that's just basic dirty talk. I want the dirty talk. That is like the hook for me, as you will see from what I'm going to read for you.
I love that. I'm also a fan of the dirty talk, so I fully endorse that statement.
Yeah, I just like I want to hear like what is going through their heads. I want it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Andrea, how about you? And I feel like this will tie in great to your rubric for the day and the criteria you're actually looking for.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share my rubric. Okay. So this is obviously subjective, but I do think it's helpful. Like in creating this rubric, I had to like sit down and think about like what do I think is important and you know, create objective, subjective criteria. So what I came up with was originality, because I think if you read a lot of books, it's nice to have something unique and you know, special to this relationship or the book. And then emotional intensity, or like something that kind of shows the relationship developing. I think that's also important to me. And then how much I'm transported into the scene, like how much this scene just like makes me feel like I am there. I'm kind of like part of this and I'm feeling the emotions, right? And then eroticism, which is really hard to kind of pin down because it takes so many different forms.
Sure.
Like some of it could be like dirty talk or you know, like the way bodies are talked about or something. Like, you know, it's you know when you see it. And then believability, because nothing takes me out of a scene more than when they're doing something that doesn't feel anatomically possible, or when like based on what I know, the majority of like, you know, people with vulvas and clitorises and vaginas, like very few people come from like penetration. And sometimes there are sex scenes where like they're so phallocentric where I'm and like, you know, it's just like the magic penis that makes her come, and I'm like, no, this isn't believable, you know? So it, and again, like it's kind of like believable, I guess, in terms of like my experience or what I kind of know about like how the majority of women, like what kind of stimulation they need to orgasm. So anyways, so there's that. And then I think that you lose points the more the sex really relies on gender essentialism, like his maleness. And you're like, do you mean a penis? Like, or things like that, where it takes me out of it a bit, where I'm like, can you describe something that is sexy that doesn't just like have to rely on our ideas of what men are and what women are, and just like it becomes shorthand for a lot of things. And I'm like, you're a writer, I want you to show me what is going on and not fall back on kind of our expectations of gender to like make this scene sexy, or our expectations of power dynamics to make this sexy.
Yeah, because I've definitely heard the terms womanhood and manhood also used to describe the parts.
Yeah. Like there's other words you can use and that are more descriptive.
And we all have our, I think our certain words that like work for us and don't work for us. Like I, for one, never going to be part of the Folds Club. Like, it's just not a fan. It's just me. I don't, and I know it's not just me actually, but I to this day don't have a preferred term though for what would be the labia. Like, I'm like, I don't know, because somebody asked me, do you prefer lips? And I said, no, absolutely not. Like, I don't know if there is a term that I've read specifically for when talking about the labia that I'm just like, I don't know if I have a term that I like, but this is my own personal problem.
You have to keep reading.
Yeah, I have to keep reading and see what we come up with next. I love it. Well, I'm excited because we've got a rubric, we've got 2 scenes, and I have no idea where this is going to go, and we shall see. So I think, contestants, it is time for you each to go ahead and introduce the books you'll be reading, just with a title, author, and a little bit about each one. So let's start with Jess this time.
Okay, so I actually am going to be reading from the book by my favorite author when I first started reading romance. Got really into it. It was Lorelei James, Branded as Trouble.
Tell us a little bit about Branded as Trouble.
Okay, so in it, it's set in a small town. It is a cowboy romance. India is the female protagonist. She is the complete opposite of a small town girl. She moved in, she's tatted up, she's a bad girl, and bad boy rancher Colt and her just totally connect from the get-go, but he's just out of rehab. So they can't get into sexy times because of those rules, that like you don't have a relationship. So there's a lot of back and forth and flirtiness and sexiness before they finally get into more than being friends. And when they do, they go hard.
I love it. I love it. Okay. And then, Stephanie, what are you going to be sharing for us today?
I'm going to be reading from one of my favorite authors, and she's actually a good friend of mine too, Melanie Moreland, Shifting Gears. And this is one of my favorite series because the men in this series are like blue collar, big muscles, hardworking men, but they're like such mushes inside. And that's like my favorite. I love a guy who's like big and tough, but inside he's just a big mush for his woman. And this book is actually probably the sexiest one so far because Brett and Kelly, like, they're together, but she's not wanting to commit. She's always running from him, and they're always kind of screwing behind, closed doors and in secret. So the first chapter, when I read it, like, I remember I was in the pedicure chair and I was like, this is how she started. Like, oh my God. And it's like this whole like interlude, and it's like, it's a quick scene that I'm going to read, but it kind of like defines them, like how he's kind of like, he really, really wants her and she's just like right out of his grasp, but it's hot too. So
I love it. Well, and I can say I've read both authors before. I haven't read Shifting Gears yet, but I did read the first book in Melanie's series, actually for one of our Boobies and Noobies book club picks. So that's like more recently in my mind, although I did pick up a Lorelei James book on a recent bookstore haul. So I've read both authors. I'm a fan of both. I'm excited to hear the selections. Andrea, have you read either of these books?
I have not read either of these books. So
love it.
I'm a blank slate.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, then it is time for us to dive into our readings. So with that, I'm going to ask Jess to take the floor and share your scene.
Okay. Can I preface it with like what is kind of going on beforehand?
Yeah, if you just want to set it up for like where we're at in the story, that's fine.
Because we're starting like right as they're about to get into it. But to set the scene, basically Colt has taken India to his parents' house as like a meet the parents kind of thing. And instead of being her usual badass amazing self, she took out all of her piercings. She wore long sleeve shirt to cover her tattoos, long skirt, trying to be modest and what she thinks the conservative rancher family's mom and dad would want to see, and he is not pleased about it whatsoever. So, here we go. Sweet Jesus, India, when you look at me like that, like what? Like you love me? Like I'm a man worthy of you? But he suspected she didn't know everything he'd ever wanted was visible in her eyes, so he backtracked, chickened out really, and focused on the one thing she would admit to: overpowering lust. Like you want to fight me, then fuck me. India didn't deny it. Are we done with the fighting portion? Because I'd sure like to fuck you. Right here, right now, against the dirty truck as you're shooting me dirty looks. Her response? She launched herself at him. Her mouth slammed into his in a kiss so raw it felt as if she had knocked the wind out of him. Colt pushed her up against the pickup. His hands raced everywhere as he tried to find a single section of her skin. Damn it, of all the times to be buttoned up. He hooked his fingers at the hem of her shirt between the lapels and jerked until buttons flew and her warm flesh greeted his eager hands. India didn't protest. In fact, ruining her shirt only made her kiss him harder. Her hands dove into his hair, not for a leisurely, tender stroking. She pulled his hair into tight fists as her lower body ground against his fly. God damn, he wanted to suck on her skin, mark her, bite her, but the ferocity of the kiss made it impossible for him to release her lips even momentarily. He growled into her mouth, bumping his cock into her belly. His hands scraped up her back, maneuvering around to cup her breasts. When his thumbs rasped over her nipples, he didn't feel the rings. When he broke his mouth free, he ate a path down her throat. She arched, bearing all to him. One tug and her bra cups opened. Rather than look, he let his mouth do the walking, straight to her left nipple. Yes, a ring. A smaller one than what she had been wearing, but she hadn't taken it out in a fit of propriety. He sucked and lapped and bit and worshipped that tiny bit of metal until she moaned. He suckled her breast deep enough the ring tickled the back of his tongue. Another moan escaped as he switched to the other side and did it again and again and again. Colt, I need you. What? You, I need you. You've got me. His cock, already straining behind his zipper, jerked when India's hands dropped to his waistband. She unhooked the belt buckle, popped the button, and eased down the zipper. Her fingers snaked into his boxers, and she circled her hand around him and squeezed. Colt hissed at the intense pleasure, feeling the velvety smoothness of her palm on his shaft, the tightness of her grip as she stroked from the base to the wet tip. Lift me against the door. You wanted to fuck me so bad? Do it like you mean it. With her hand commanding his cock, he couldn't remember why this wasn't the best idea ever. Wait, condom, he rasped. We don't have a... So fucking what? You didn't use a condom last night when you came on my belly, or in my ass. India teased his ear with her hot breath. I want to feel that heat in my cunt. I want to feel your cock sliding and pounding inside me without latex. Your wetness mixed with mine. Just hardness and heat. Just you, Colt. Like he could deny her that. Like he could deny himself. He yanked his jeans below his knees, then he boosted her up, fighting with the material of her skirt until it bunched at her waist. Help me. I am. She wrapped her legs around his hips and pulled her thong to the side. I'm ready. Please, Colt. Now. Colt bent his knees and drove deep in a single thrust. India dug her fingernails into his shoulders. Again. Hard like that. Again. His slow withdrawal only made the hard, fast plunge more rewarding. Again and again. Over and over. No kissing. He'd crack her teeth if he put his mouth on hers. He lived in the moment, the feel of her hot pussy tightening with every stroke, the sharp bite of her nails through his shirt, her irregular breathing fanning his cheek, the earthy scent of his lover filling his lungs as he filled her body with his. She drummed her heels into his butt. Do that little grinding thing. Yeah, like that. Come on, India. Come on my cock. Let me feel those sweet muscles tightening around my dick as you're coming hard. And scene.
Well, hot diggity damn. All right.
Woo! The dirty talk.
Yeah, if you're looking for the dirty talk, that seemed to have it for sure. So, excellent reading, Jess. Well done, you.
Well, thank you. That wasn't embarrassing at all.
You did it. You did it, and it was lovely, and I think we all enjoyed it.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, over to Stephanie. Let's hear what you've got, Steph.
I wasn't sure how long it had to be, so hopefully this is enough. This is where I
Whatever amount you decide to share will be enough.
The room was dim, cool, and closed off. The cement floor and wooden shelves rudimentary. A required spot, but not decorated to please the eye. Necessary for storage, parts and supplies kept in neat order, and right now deserted. The perfect spot to fuck her. The door shut behind us, cutting off the noises from the garage out front. The darkness was welcome, needed. She liked to be fucked in the dark. She gasped as I pulled her against the shelves, her low moan of pleasure a quiet sound in the room as I slid my hand up her neck, around her head, feeling the silkiness of her short hair whisper along my fingers. I cradled her skull as my mouth descended, feeling that grip of intense pleasure flow through me when our lips melded. Our tongues slid together, a sensual dance we'd done before. Her mouth was hot, wet, and sweet. She wrapped her arms around my neck, rising on her toes to be closer. I dropped my hands to her perfect ass and lifted her, groaning in satisfaction as she wrapped her legs around my waist and my cock settled between her legs. The warmth of her blazing even through the material of my coveralls. I slanted my head, taking her mouth harder, the passion inside me sizzling and popping. We were a mass of touch and sensation. Our hands were everywhere, skimming, touching, pressing, pulling. I ran my mouth over her cheek to her ear, my tongue tasting her skin. You want me, Shutterbug? You want my cock inside you? Yes, she gasped as I bit down, teasing the juncture between her neck and her shoulder. Please. You asked so nicely, I teased. I slid one hand up her torso, cupping her breast, using my thumb to tease her tight nipple. As usual, she wore nothing beneath her shirt, her skin smooth under my touch. What else do you want? I asked, lifting her higher, sucking her through her thin material of her tank top. She whimpered as I took the other nipple and sucked, slid my hand to the back of her thigh, delving under the loose shorts she wore and teasing the lace between her legs. Oh, I feel you, I whispered, wet and hot for me. You're aching for me, aren't you? Brett, she gasped, please, as I slipped my finger under the lace and touched her, lightly teasing, letting my index finger barely stroke her. Tell me. Yes, I want you. I want you to fuck me. Ease the ache, she pleaded. And what do I get? Me. My mouth around your dick, then buried inside me. I grunted in approval.
Ooh, quick and dirty. I like it. And also, I think our friend Amanda from Talk About Swoon on Instagram would appreciate this scene because it's got some cotton mouth. There's the mouthing around fabric, which I look forward to. She does a special every year on Instagram about cottonmouth scenes in romance. And I think that's a great example of one. And I love me a man in coveralls. So, you know.
And that's got dirty talk too, so.
Yes. No, they both had great dirty talk. Andrea, over to you. Tell us your overall feelings about our scenes that we've heard.
Okay, I was tabulating the scores I've been keeping track of. Okay, so and I mean, it's a little hard to compare them because also they're different lengths and it's hard to contextualize them within like the other sex scenes. So, just purely based on these scenes and what little I know of these books. Okay. So, let's start with Jess, who read Branded as Trouble by Lorelei James. So I thought that I'll start with believability. I thought the believability was high. There was grinding, there was neck licking, there was mutual touching, and sort of it made sense like why they were hot, based on what they were doing, what they were saying to each other, all of that stuff. So high marks there. In terms of eroticism, there was hair gripping, there was growling, there was dirty talk. I think it was hitting those marks as well. And then for transportation, it was hitting all the senses, like taste, touch, visual, etc. And then for emotional intensity and relationship development, I think that Jess, you set up beforehand really nicely kind of where this scene is coming from. And especially, it's lovely when characters want the other character to be themselves and love the things about them that are unique to them and don't want them to change. So I think that this scene does a really good job of kind of sussing that out and talking about him chickening out and really like going for like, okay, well, sex is safe, but like emotions hard, yeah, classic. I did a few points because of the like no condom, like I want to like feel you in me, like I start having questions. I'm like, did they get tested? Like, I start getting out of, being transported and stuff like that. And I think it also, it, again, this is just like my personal thing where I know it has become shorthand for kind of like emotional involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to see that other ways, or kind of see the sexual safety addressed in some way. So anyway,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead. Did they address that?
They do. This isn't like a first time together sort of thing. They have both been out of relationships for multiple years. And like I said, they were going through rehab together. So they were doing testing and all sorts of things. And it's all addressed earlier in the book. So yeah, but I get that it's not in the scene. And yeah, it kind of throws you when you're like, oh, okay, they're going there already.
Yeah, right. Okay, so out of 10, I gave the scene a 9.
Oh,
yes.
wow. High marks. Okay.
So then Stephanie, you read Shifting Gears by Melanie Moreland. And let's see. So I thought, again, the emotional intensity was nice. And it was in first person. So it was, as you were talking about earlier, kind of getting access to that interiority. And I think, what we understand is that like cis men are socialized to not really express their emotions. And I felt like we felt that in this scene. So that was really nice. And again, all the senses were represented, lots of transportation. I thought it was very erotic. I'm not doing this on purpose, but kind of ending on the like, I felt it was like very phallocentric, like cock sucking and like, then I'm going to fuck you. So I was like, I would have loved to have seen and again, I don't know the context of other sex scenes, but like a little bit more focused on like her body in that. So that was the only part where I'm like, okay. That would have done it a little bit more for me. So I gave this scene an 8 out of 10. So it's still a very sexy scene. And probably, I mean, just again, head to head, it was shorter. So there was just like a little bit less room to develop some of that stuff that might be developed elsewhere in the book and in other scenes. So, it's always hard, but I'm sorry I had to choose. And so Jess, Brandon is Trouble is the winner of today's head-to-head match.
Today's showdown winner. Yeah. No, and honestly, I mean, it's very hard to take scenes out of context for sure and like have to fill in those gaps of like, have they had this consent talk? Have they had talks about, what's going on? I know I haven't read Melanie's book yet, but I've read the previous one in the series, which sets up who these characters are. So I have a little more context about their relationship, like from the previous book as well, like heading into this one. So yeah, all those factors play into how, we're going to make our decisions. And of course, there's also what we each personally find sexy. But I would pick up a copy of each of these books based off of y'all's readings.
They were both very sexy. And I want to commend both of you for reading those scenes so well because your readings were excellent. You really helped me, the listener, feel transported. So you both get 10s out of 10.
Yay!
Aww. Like I said, everybody's a winner here. Like,
Absolutely.
Let's be honest.
Absolutely. I mean, we got to listen to this morning. This is amazing.
Exactly. And now I have 2 more books to add to my TBR list. And I hope everybody there's a fly. I hope everyone at home listening feels the same way. And just in case you need a brief reminder, again, Stephanie shared Shifting Gears by Melanie Moreland. Jess shared Branded as Trouble by Lorelei James. They are both available now. I highly recommend you pick up a copy and read for yourselves. If nothing else, for the steamy scenes, but of course it's a full book, so you do get more with it along with your daily dose of sexcerps. But thank you, all of you, for doing this because I know I enjoyed it. And Andrea, I always appreciate a good excuse for a rubric, so thank you for having a academic mind like myself that likes to organize spreadsheets.
I love spreadsheets. Like literally anytime you need a spreadsheet or a database, call me.
Good to know. Andrea's your gal for that. Before I let y'all go, can everybody just share where people can find and follow you? Because obviously you all have amazing projects of your own too. So Stephanie, how about you start and tell everybody where they can find you?
Well, you could find me on Facebook in my readers group, Stephanie's Rose Garden. I have a newsletter, and I'm on TikTok, but I'm not good at it. I just really like enjoy Jess when she does TikTok.
I do too. Jess's TikToks are great.
Yeah, Jess is really great. So I just kind of like, enjoy her stuff. And I've tried my own stuff. I mean, I'm getting there, but it's not my thing quite yet. No, I have a new book coming out in August. So I'll be on social media a lot more, I guess, as it comes. It's older age gap uncle's best friend, which is I kind of dipped my toe in forbidden waters a little bit.
Ooh.
Which was a lot of fun. So I'm excited. And yeah, so and this was really fun. This was a really fun thing to do on a Sunday morning. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for your next book. That sounds like a book we could hear a scene from on Slick Summer Nights.
You absolutely could.
Fantastic. Jess, how about you? Where can we know we can find you on TikTok, but where else?
Yes, I am on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the big ones at Jess Bryant Books. Same username across the board. You can also find me in my reader group, Jess Bryant's Bibliophiles. We don't just talk my books, we talk all romance books, we talk self-care. Yeah, so I hope you guys will come hang out with me. As I said, I'm on TikTok a lot, so come on over.
The TikToks are awesome.
Yes, I know. I agree. And Andrea, where can everybody listen to Shelf Love and find you?
So, just like Boobies and Noobies, you can find Shelf Love on your favorite podcatcher podcast app. Also, you can find transcripts and information about all my episodes on shelflovepodcast.com. And I am on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Shelf Love Pod on Twitter, Shelf Love Podcast on Instagram. And I love doing polls because, again, I'm always just trying to categorize people's responses to things. So I love doing a good Twitter poll. And what's going on the podcast right now that might be interesting, given we were talking about getting exposed to romance as young readers, is I'm talking about young adult romance right now. And then I'm going to get back into the real sexy stuff after that. So I started summer with like summer reading idea.
Love it. Love it. And Andrea's also been doing a deep dive into older published romances, which I have been enjoying through her eyes via her Instagram story. So if you want some slightly potentially cringeworthy covers and titles and perhaps a little bit more talk about some of the older problematic sometimes tropes in romance, she's got some info for you.
I sure do. Yes. Yeah. Some of those are, I got 231 vintage romances from the 80s primarily that I got in eBay lots. So I've just been like honestly, there's so much in there. And one of the things that I'm discovering, we like to pretend that things were only problematic in the past. It's a mixed bag, just like it is today. So it's like we have sadly not left some of this in the past, but it's fun. It's fun to kind of see how things have changed too.
Yeah, I love it. Oh God, and I love those covers so much. So good. But no, this has been fabulous, ladies. Thank you all so much for joining me, and thanks to everybody listening for Slick Summer Nights. We have one more episode heading your way this July, so look out for that. And of course, keep up on the socials to cast your votes for what you think is the slickest scene of them all, because we're just voices on a podcast. It all comes down to everybody else making their own decision as well. So thanks for listening, and stay cool out there. Stay hydrated. Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Noobies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Noobies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.